that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day. We have a criminal justice system in this country. We have civil litigation. And former presidents are not immune from being accountable by either one.
As we have learned in the last several weeks, we're joined now on our roundtable by Donna Brazile, former RNC chair, Trump White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, the executive editor of the AP, Julie Pace, and Washington Post congressional correspondent Mariana Sotomayor. And Reince, let me begin with you. I didn't have much luck with Governor Burgum getting a response to the indictment, but I'm certain you've read it this weekend. What was your response?
Well, I mean, look, I probably would have done what Mike Pence did if I was in the same place. You know, I'm not a person that likes to get too close to the line. But what I also think, though, is that if you could write the wildest screenplay and have a mini-series as far as what's happening in this campaign, this would be it. And if you look at what's happening in the Republican base, on day one, when I walked into the White House on January 20th, I woke up that morning to a New York Times article that Russia played a role in the Trump victory. And if there's two things that are consistent in the Republican base right now, it's number one, that Trump is under constant attack and the base repels that. And number two, the issue of election integrity has been part of the Republican base for decades. So unwinding all of that and then inserting all of these issues into that mix creates an almost self-fulfilling prophecy that as all these things get racked up, it's making President Trump even stronger.
To your credit, you said you would have done what Mike Pence did and certified the election, but isn't part of the reason that the Republican base continues to hold on to these views is because Republican leaders, like Kevin McCarthy, like other leaders, instead of calling out what they believe about what happened, reinforce what the base already thinks?
Well, look, the governor you just interviewed from North Dakota, he didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. Why? Because he knows that over half, 60, 70% of the Republican base believe that
but that's my exact point. They don't stand up to the beliefs.
And they would all lose. I mean, the reality is they know the truth about where they're at. It's a market-based economy. It's a market-based political system. I mean, we have two worlds that we're living in. We're living in one world that thinks President Trump is the worst thing ever and he's a criminal. And we have another world that thinks that there's a split system of justice and that President Trump didn't do anything wrong. And I talked to state party leaders over the weekend in the early states. And I asked them, I didn't tell them what to think. Is this hurting President Trump? What's the effect? And the response immediately was no. And this is reasonable people in the party. No. It's actually making President Trump even stronger.
But I think Reince is making an important point here, which is that Republicans are reading this indictment through a purely political lens, Republican leaders. And they're making a calculation that they have to, with few exceptions, like Mike Pence, because of his direct involvement in this, they have to keep an arm's length from this. They can't look at this and make a judgment on the merits of it because it would hurt them politically. But I do think it's important for us to take a minute to talk about the merits of this indictment. I mean, it is a striking indictment in terms of the scope of what the president is charged with here, in terms of the way that his actions are outlined in those days after January 6th. And I think that it does go far beyond, certainly, from a risk standpoint for him as well, the earlier indictments that we've seen, and potentially even the Georgia indictment.
And Donna, it goes beyond what we saw even in the January 6th committee. You just heard Congressman Aguilar saying he wishes he had some of the evidence that the special counsel has, including those contemporaneous notes from Mike Pence.
Not only that, George, I was shocked by the level of detail with regards to talking to state officials. I mean, your beloved home state of Wisconsin, after the Trump campaign ordered a recount and paid for it, the Republican leaders said, there's no there. When you look at this indictment, it is a story of how the former president tried to pressure Republican officials, state officials, to overturn the results. And at one point he said, don't worry about it. We'll leave it up to me and the congressman, knowing that, you know, he could not find the truth of election fraud, but rather he said, we'll just spin it. Let me just say something. And I've been on the ground for most of my adult life. In fact, every 2 years, I used to tell my family, I'm going on a campaign, so I'll talk to you in 2 more years. This is an attempt to undermine faith in our democracy, undermine faith in the integrity of our election. And what the former president did was he went to great lengths to try to deny the results of this election to the eventual winner. That was Joe Biden. I got to say one last thing. I'll never forget that night that Al Gore called after the Supreme Court said, stop. And he said, the campaign is over, we're going back to business, which is the business of government. Donald Trump never did that. He never said it's over, let us stop, let us move on.
Mariana, you cover, let me just go to Mariana first, then we'll come back to you, Ryan. So you cover Congress, of course, every day. When you see someone like Speaker McCarthy and you're reporting on that, compare Donald Trump's actions to Hillary Clinton and Al Gore, who both conceded the election, just give us a sense of what it's like in the room. Do you believe that he believes it, or he just feels like he has to say it?
Yeah, you know, when you first hear it, it is surprising because it's not true. I mean, both of those candidates conceded that election, and that is a radically different outcome than what former President Trump has done. But it is part of the playbook. I mean, we have seen McCarthy these last couple of weeks inching closer towards an impeachment inquiry against former President Donald Trump, current President Joe Biden, which a lot of the public polling shows people don't like that. They see that as political, but this is something for the base. And as much as they might be playing to right now the primary election, those voters, I don't know how they're going to do in the general. And a lot of vulnerable Republicans on Capitol Hill don't want to be taking votes on expunging the last couple of impeachments against Trump. They don't want to be voting on a possible impeachment vote on Biden. This is just not something that they want to be doing, not something that their own constituents are talking about. And at the end of the day, that general election politics, voters think of this differently, and we are also seeing that in a lot of polling.
Let me bring that to Ryan's previous, because you talked a lot about the base in your first responses. Ryan, is placating the base going to doom the Republican Party in the general election?
Well, I mean, if you look at the polling today, George, it shows that the election would be tied between President Trump and President Biden. Biden's running about 20% below where he was in 2020. And if you look at Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin, they were all three decided by less than half a percentage point. We're not dealing with a national election anymore. We are dealing with 8 elections in 8 states, and it comes down to 100,000 people. And the campaigns know what beer you drink, what car you drive, how many kids you have, how much money you make, and what drives you and what doesn't drive you. And all of this is going to get thrown into the washing machine, and throw Cornel West in as well, and a real Green Party candidate. I don't know what's going to happen.
But are you pretty confident Donald Trump's going to get the nomination?
I mean, at this point, I think there's a couple people making moves. I think that Vivek has made some moves. I think Chris Christie's made some moves in New Hampshire. But, I mean, they're all running 20, 30, 40% below President Trump. And my point before is that these issues, indictment after indictment, election integrity, this is embedded into the decision-making that you're asking if he's going to be the nominee.
I totally get that, and I want to go to Donna in a second, but I just have to ask you one more question. So you believe he's more likely than not to be the nominee at this point. Are you comfortable with the fact, as a former chairman of the RNC, a former chief of staff in the White House, with your nominee facing 3 felony trials as he's moving into the general election?
Well, look, I don't think it helps you in a general election. I mean, certainly these indictments are not comfortable. I would be, like, you know, curled up in a ball in the corner, you know, if it was me. But the reality is that...
Refreshing candor there.
I can't take that kind of heat. But, you know, the reality is that where we're at right now in this country, where division is profit and unity is a loser, and all of this just creates more and more attention for President Trump. He's going to be, I think, at this point, if he keeps going, the nominee. Unless
Donna, we all saw the New York Times poll this week, basically a dead heat.
That's a dead heat. That's because, as I said before, the Democratic family is still being unified. When you look at the president's weaknesses, it's among young voters. And I talked to his campaign manager this weekend, Julie Chavez Rodriguez. They have a strategy to re-engage with those voters, to bring those voters back into the room. Once those voters come back into the room, it's not going to be a dead heat. Look, Donald Trump is out on bail. He's out on bail. He's been indicted. I mean, he was arrested. And while we don't have the fingerprints and the mugshot, the Republicans are willing to put their brand, their entire apparatus behind someone who's been indicted for defrauding the United States government and denying the people of America the right to vote. That's huge. We've never seen this before. And the notion that all of a sudden we got to continue to break so that we can hear his blues, hear the former president say, I'm going to go after you if you come after me. That's what he said to the Republican officials who tried to certify the election. Follow the law. I don't know the Speaker of the House of Arizona, but you should call him and say, how do you feel today with all of the death threats? Call Ms. Freeman and her daughter. How do you feel with all of the death threats? And ask Mike Pence, how do you feel with all of the death threats? This is un-American for the former president to continue to threaten our democracy.
And Julie,
Donna, it's going to be a choice, and the choice is going to be, those are things that are firing you up, but those people are in Arizona are also going to ask about the economy, they're going to ask about Ukraine, they're going to ask about ISIS, they're going to ask about the border, they're going to ask about Hunter Biden, and guess what? It's not going to be some national advertising campaign, it's going to be individual people, 10,000 in Arizona, 20,000 in Pennsylvania, and so on and so forth. And that's what these elections
are.
Julie, one of the things that's going to affect that.
About the right to vote. They're going to ask about reproductive rights. And you know what? We will win those debates.
One of the things this is going to depend on is whether or not these trials actually do happen during the course of the campaign. It's pretty clear that the Trump legal strategy is delay.
I mean, timing is going to be so crucial here. I mean, are we going to be facing, it's a very different situation, I think, really, if we are having Trump on trial actively in the primaries, potentially the back half of the primaries, or if they're going to try to get this pushed back further. I think, ultimately, when we talk about some of these other Republican candidates right now, I think, they can say whatever they want when they're on the ground in Iowa. They can hold their town halls in New Hampshire. If anything is going to change the dynamic in the Republican primary, it's got to be around the way the electorate views Trump and his electability in the general election. I think that's what we haven't seen yet, and I think only really these trials are probably going to be able to potentially shake up that.
And Mariana, you talked about Kevin McCarthy inching towards impeachment because some in his base want that to happen right now for President Biden, but he's also facing a pretty stark fact that if the election continues to go in this manner, a lot of his newest members who won Biden-held seats back in 2020 could get knocked out in 24.
Absolutely, and I am hearing that a number of those 18 Biden districts, those Republicans are starting to really behind the scenes get very aggravated. Once they actually do something and confront McCarthy, I mean, that's a significant number. We are likely seeing next month in September, once they're all back, government shutdown fights, and a lot of these political moments where McCarthy is very much going to be tested from not just the far right, but also these members who won them the majority.
And we will be watching. Thank you all very much for a great discussion.